Welcome to Digital Asset News. Take the top stories in cryptocurrency and digital assets and break them down into bite-sized pieces. Today, we're going to go over something a little bit different. We're going to go through an educational series where we're going to take a look at the instances or the purpose of blockchain, smart contracts, and what an oracle is. So let's break it down. So it comes down to what's blockchain, what's a smart contract, and what's an oracle. So blockchain, just to make it basic for those of you who don't know, is a distributed ledger technology. Ledger being the key word. Well, what's a ledger? So a ledger is essentially this. It is a spreadsheet used in accounting where you can have debits, credits, and balances. And this is just essentially just a spreadsheet. Very simple. This is a ledger right there. So what's a distributed ledger? Well, a distributed ledger would be the same thing, ledger, debits, credits, and balances that you might see in your accounting or in your bank or wherever else. And distributed means that it is going all over the place. It is in different computers or it is in different nodes, but in some way, shape, or form, it is being cast out to different, not platforms, but into different systems. So it's not just sitting on one computer in one place, it is distributed. Pretty simple, right? Now, when you do something like this, when you distribute it out to all the different individuals or to different nodes or different computers, whatever you want to call it, we would consider this somewhat decentralized. And there is just little nuances and caveats there, but essentially that's what it is. So imagine if you had your ledger and you wanted to decentralize it, you wanted to put it out to all different areas, you can have it on different nodes, different computers, and it could be something as simple as 10 or 20, or you could have something as big as like thousands of computers, depending on what kind of distributed ledger that you wanted to do. Bitcoin, for example, has thousands of different nodes out there. So the difference between a distributed ledger and a non-distributed centralized ledger is pretty simple. So a non-distributed centralized ledger is something that you would see in your bank, where they have their little computer program and they have their ledger, and that is for your account and all the people's accounts are in the bank, and it's what we've been using for decades so far. And all the information is stored on there and is not going out to any way, shape, or form to anybody else. It sits just inside a centralized bank. So the problem with that is that they are changeable, they are immutable. There's a lot of problems with banks. People don't trust them, and this is one of those reasons. Now they say that there's, of course, they're like, oh, we don't change these types of thing, but of course for accounting and all those types of services, you can change that just with the quick tap on the keyboard or a swipe of the pen. Happens all the time. Take a look at Enron. So it can be lost or destroyed if you have one centralized type of ledger. If some kind of natural disaster, of course, it can be wiped away. And it's easily hackable. Banks pay, tens of thousands of, banks pay billions of dollars to make sure that they are not hacked, and they go through rigorous checks and balances to make sure this doesn't happen, and they still get hacked, and it still happens all the time. And then you just have to trust it, because the thing with these centralized ledgers is that you do not have access to them to see what is on the ledger itself. So if there's some kind of changes, or for some other corporations or things like that, you just have to kind of trust it that the bank's doing what they say they're doing. And I got to tell you, for my reference, there are some times I have to call the bank, like, hey, this isn't correct. What did you guys do? That's a problem. So banks are hard to trust, and we can see that throughout history. We can see that through the actually most common or the most recent things happening, like Bank of America paying $16 billion in Justice Department settlement, or things like the JP Morgan Chase scandal, $30 billion in fines and counting. And you have something like the Wells Fargo account fraud scandal just happened recently, or you have Dutch bank ING fined $900 million for spotting money laundering. Then you have something like Enron, where you have the corporations, the conglomerates, and they just run wild with their accounting services because they have a centralized ledger and no one can see it, and they can change the books, and that's where fraud happens. So that's a problem. So distributed or decentralized ledger technology is pretty simple. So we have a ledger that is going around through all different nodes, all different types of computers. It is non-changeable or immutable, as they call it, because it's very simple. When you have it in all different types of computers or all different types of nodes like Bitcoin is, that blockchain or that distributed ledger technology goes to each and every one of those different nodes or those computers, whatever you want to call it, and it verifies all the transactions. So you can't change anything if thousands upon thousands of people have it. Also, it can't be lost or destroyed because you have multiple different nodes throughout everywhere else, and it has these blockchains, and it has a distributed ledger technology, so it is everywhere. Very tough to destroy thousands upon thousands of nodes. Also, it's impossible to hack because if you change one ledger, you'd have to change the thousands of other ones. So it's very tough to hack as opposed to going to the bank, breaking into the bank as far as a hacker goes, and stealing those types of funds, which happens more often than not. And it also happens with your personal data, which we can see in the different data breaches that we have for TransUnion and those types of credit reports. And also, it is trustless because with everybody within the network, you don't have to specifically say, okay, bank, or okay, centralized figure, I trust you to make sure you're doing the right thing. You don't have to do that because it is the power of the group, because it goes through all these thousands of nodes and everything kind of works itself out because you can't change anything, which is pretty nice. So blockchain, real quick, is distributed ledger technology. Blockchain is a part of distributed ledger technology. So it is a ledger, which we talk about, that's decentralized, and all transactions are recorded by chaining them together in blocks of encrypted data. That's why it's called blockchain, right? So we'll have somebody does a transaction, and that's block 51 out of thousands of blocks, and they encrypt it. Next one is block 52. Someone else does a transaction, and they encrypt that. And then block 53, and they encrypt that. And that is essentially blockchain. So you have these chains and chains and chains and chains of blocks in distributed ledger technology. And it has these blocks, and they're all together, and it is broadcast to all these different nodes. And again, it could be 10, 20, or thousands, depending on the cryptocurrency asset. Again, Bitcoin has thousands. Somebody like EOS has blockchain producers where they only have 21, just depending. But they are all over, and that's why it's a trustless, pureless type of technology. So there is one caveat here. Distributed ledger technology and blockchain. DLT is blockchain, blockchain is DLT, but to break it down into simple terms, these are cars. Here's a car. Here also is a car. And this is also a car. We can all agree they're all cars. Some are a little bit more expensive than others. Some a little bit faster. Some run on gas. Some run on electricity. Some look pretty flashy, and some are not. But they are all cars. Now, blockchain is the same type of thing, distributed ledger technology is the same type of thing. So these are all types of distributed ledger technology. Blockchain, which is what we just talked about. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and we have between 7 and 56 transactions per second. Just as a mode of reference, Visa is around 15,000 and 25,000. It'll come up in a second. So that is blockchain. Now, DAG, or directed acyclic graph, is another type of cryptocurrency like IOTA and Ryblocks, and they have been reported, or they state that they can go between 1,500 and 7,000 transactions per second. That is debatable because I don't believe it's actually been proven so far, but it's what they say. And there's another type of distributed ledger technology. It's called Tempo, or Time Logic Protocol, like Radix, and they have 1 million transactions per second. But again, they are all distributed ledger technology. It's just that they are grouped together in different ways and are just, some are a little bit slower, some a little bit faster, some are more safer, I guess you would say. But they are all distributed ledger technology. And as a point of reference, Visa has between 1,700 and 24,000 transactions per second because they have such a high amount of transactions globally, which Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin really can't match at this point. So, real quick, blockchain is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is blockchain, like we just talked about. It's non-changeable, immutable, impossible to hack, trustless, and transparent. Plus, it is also divisible. So what's great about Bitcoin is that you don't have to buy one Bitcoin. You can buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. Those are called Satoshis. And unlike stocks, where you can only buy, one stock, or you can't buy a part of the stock, with Bitcoin and any cryptocurrency, you can break it down into hundreds of thousands of different Satoshis, which would equal one Bitcoin, which is very divisible, unlike gold. Again, you can't really break that down unless you melt it down. Also, it's easily portable. You can move Bitcoin across the world in a couple minutes or so, very cheap, whereas opposed to gold, it's going to cost you a lot of money to move it around, and it's very heavy, so that's pretty tough. So it's Bitcoin a little bit better than gold right now, and it is also censorship resistant. When I say portable, that would be a good thing if you were in, I don't know, some type of communist country where they go to seize all your assets. Great thing is that if you have gold on you, well, they're probably going to take it. But with Bitcoin, they can't take Bitcoin. It lives in all those nodes, in all those computers, in all those sections. And it is a distributed ledger technology like we just talked about. So good luck getting that. And finally, it is finite. And when I say finite, I mean that there are only 21 million that will ever be produced. And right now we were sitting around 18.5 million or so. So there is only 21 million, unlike the US dollar, the Chinese yuan, the euro, the pounds, the peso. Those can be printed at will. Right now we're going through quantitative easing where the Federal Reserve is just printing willy-nilly. They can print as much money as they want to, which might lead to hyperinflation. With Bitcoin, that can never happen because there is 21 million only. And again, it is divisible, so you could have, I believe in the future, we're not going to see people just holding one Bitcoin. It's going to be thousands of a Bitcoin because it is so divisible. And that takes us up to what's blockchain. I think we solved that. Let's take a look at what's an actual smart contract. So regular contracts, pretty simple. We have things like will and trust, home mortgage, rentals, buying a car, lending, not DeFi lending, but just regular lending and voting. So with regular contracts, it takes 1 to 3 days sometimes. Manual remittance means you actually have to go manually pay it. You might need an escrow if you're going through home mortgage. It's expensive because there's so many layers and there's all these different third parties involved. You have to physically be there, have a wet signature, and maybe a notary public. And sometimes lawyers are necessary. So it gets very expensive for regular contracts. Now, smart contracts, a little bit different. You can execute an agreement on a blockchain automatically without a third party. So essentially you're eliminating the middleman and you can decrease errors, cost, and time. And usually when we think about smart contracts, we think Cardano, EOS, but basically it's mostly with Ethereum right now. Ethereum is the main player in this stage. So the agreement could be anything as far as smart contracts. It could be lending money or crypto, storing your medical data, buying or selling a home, process an insurance claim, vote an election, anything that could happen between two parties. So if you take a look at smart contracts and we look at the old way for regular placed contracts that we have today, 1 to 3 days, manual remittance, escrow expensive, lawyers necessary, right? These are for wills, home mortgage, everything we just talked about before. So with this one, we can say, hey, look, instead of taking 1 to 3 days, it's only going to take minutes. Now they have a smart contract. Instead of manual remittance, it's automatic. It's automatically taken off the blockchain for whatever that you've decided to use, usually Ethereum. Escrow is necessary. Escrow may not be necessary if we're going to do home mortgages. Expensive, not so much because we're eliminating the middle person, so it's a fraction of the cost. And you don't need physical presence because it's just a digital signature. And lawyers may not be necessary, so you're saving a ton of time and money. So, what's blockchain? Answer that. What's a smart contract? Answer that. Let's talk about what's an oracle. So here's the problem. With smart contracts, they cannot access off-chain data. So if you have your Ethereum, that can only take the data on that blockchain. It can't pull out data like the escrow. It can't pull out data like your identification. It just can't do those types of things because it's confined to the blockchain itself. And that's a problem. So here's a solution. We have what's called an oracle. And an oracle is able to pull in off-chain data. So the things that might be needed for these types of instances, if you have like a will and trust, you're going to set it up for your kids later on, you're probably going to need an account where they can pull the actual money from. So we're going to need to pull that from off-chain data. Home mortgage, they probably have to pull your credit report, among other things. Rentals, they might need a background check. Buying a car, you're going to need to check out your insurance. And then if you're going to do like DeFi lending, you're going to need to check the rates as they fluctuate greatly from day to day, week to week. And if you're going to do buying a car, insurance, and voting, of course, you're going to have to prove identity. So these are all the things that we're going to need that we're going to have to pull off chain, which is why we need an oracle. So the thing is, if you don't have an oracle, you can't pull this data at all into your smart contract. So really, it comes down to you need some type of cryptocurrency that is an oracle, which can pull these, think of it like an API. It's going to pull these credit reports, this insurance, this personal information, everything that you could think of to do to pull off-chain data can pull into these smart contract to actually verify it so it can actually execute. But here's the problem. The problem is, if you can hack the oracle, you can hack all these places. Or if you think of it this way, if you have one oracle and it's only referencing one point, for instance, they could in some way, shape, or form hack your identity and change your identity, and then the smart contract would still execute because it has just one point of where it's checking. Same thing with if you're looking for your information on your credit report and they hack into that, or insurance, they somehow hack into that, or they just hack the actual oracle itself and they pull falsified data. They can do whatever they want to. So here's what we need, what's called an oracle. And the solution is one of these oracles is CHAINLINK. So CHAINLINK is going to not just take one reference point, it's going to take multiple data reference points. So instead of just looking at, we'll say like the DMV for your personal identification, it could look at other things like maybe pulling information for your birth certificate, or maybe other types of background checks. And it can go for all the different types or different organizations that have this information and pull all this data from everywhere to verify it. And the more that we have, the less chance that we'll get hacked and this smart contract can actually execute. So you can see why these types of oracles are going to be very important in the future, especially with all the different scams and different hacking that is going on, which I see is going to be a major problem, which is why I believe in CHAINLINK. So I think we've answered the question of what's a blockchain, what's a smart contract, and what's an oracle. So I hope that video answered the majority of your questions, or all of them hopefully. If you like those types of videos, I'm going to have 2 more pop up. They're going to be on your left and right. The first one will be the latest video or upload that we've done here at Digital Asset News. And the second one will be additional information about cryptocurrency and digital assets, such as the bull run basics, what a non-fungible token is, and all the different things that you're going to need to know to be in this space. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and I will see you on the next one.